All eyes are on Washington, and the red carpet is officially rolled out, because President Cyril Ramaphosa has landed in the United States. That's right, South Africa's commander-in-chief is in town and getting ready to step into the Lion's Den, also known as the Oval Office, where Donald Trump is waiting. Now this isn't just some handshake and go photo op. This meeting is being billed as a major attempt to reset diplomatic relations between the two nations.
I think the Trump administration does know what the truth is. So it is not important to go and grandstand in public, and because otherwise you're going to end up in a Zelensky situation where it's the two parties trying to best each other. I think that matter can be dealt with better privately rather than publicly. I think what is public and important, and remember the U.S. is a very, Donald Trump certainly is a very transactional leader. So the question is, what is South Africa has to offer? And what does America have to offer? If you look at how his trip to the UAE, to the trip of the Arabs was, it was a very transactional, rich trip, and not a trip of trying to focus on, like he personally said himself last week. He said when he was in the Arab countries, I'm not here to come and deal with this country on a moral lens. I'm here to look at the country in terms of the best interests of America. So it's about South Africa putting on the table what's the best interest of South Africa and the best interest of America, and how can we mutually meet each other.
Mr. Beneza, thank you so much for your time as well. I think there's a lot of questions that we hear coming around how the decision was made as well for the president to say, well, this is who will be flanking me. Minister for Agriculture, John Steenhuisen, what you think he'll bring to the table, Park Stahl from Trade and Competition. You've got, of course, Minister in the Presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, as well as Ronald Lamola, no surprises there, of DIRCO. But is this the right team for us to get to, which is really, I suppose, the most important thing for South Africa, that trade discussion?
Sure. Look, I do believe that the president has got the strong team with him and the right team, I think, on two accounts. Firstly, I think President Donald Trump will be looking to make a deal. Most of his sort of international tours and diplomatic engagements have been around trying to make a business deal that's in the interest of the U.S. Obviously, it'll always be a transactional thing, as Thabo just mentioned. And so it will come down to what South Africa has to offer and what the U.S. Will gain from this. And I guess we'll be also looking to gain for our own exports. From the perspective of the importance of agriculture exports to the U.S., again, that's important, and hence we've got the agricultural minister. But the second point that I think the delegation will set is a strong message of the collaborative approach that the president has taken in his second term, whether this is from the perspective of the GNU, but also just I think the optics of the delegation that he's got is also going to be clear in dispelling any kind of myths or misinformation around South Africa being, oppressing white South African minorities, which is clearly not true.
Yeah, and we're going to get into the bits and bobs of it, but we did, of course, hear Makwenya just moments ago saying that the details may not necessarily be the core intention of that meeting, right? The details of what we want to get from a trade relationship point of view. But I do want to look at that. But in a moment, let's sit with the team, Mr. Kalafeng, that he's brought. Beneza saying the optics of it look really good to even dispel the persecution.
And that is for that reason that, pardon me, and it's for that reason that he doesn't have to say much about the misinformation and disinformation, because obviously you can't have a white minister of agriculture and Afrikaans one and have Afrikaans people saying that they're being oppressed, clearly, unless he himself is selling out his own people. So I think from an optics perspective and so from messaging, that says the message on its own. But I think also, as Sia has says, the combination of the teams is purely transactional on the trade side, and from an agricultural perspective, it's the optics of a white person and agriculture, which is the message that we need to dispel without getting into it so much.
Yeah.
I think it's a very strong theme, actually, and I think the good thing about Cyril, President Cyril Ramaphosa, is his ability to not want to get into a street fight. I mean, if you look at, for example, how he handled the challenge that we had with President Paul Kagame in Rwanda, he never went into the ring. He dealt with that in the right channels, and I think we can be comfortable about one thing. Going into this into the White House is also a good thing, because instead of sitting here and waiting and watching the movie take place, by us going to the United States, we're showing a couple of things. One, we're showing that we're an independent sovereign, but also a country that is not afraid of itself and has got nothing to hide. And that is why we're able to go there, because if we had anything to hide, we will not be going to America, because we'll be afraid of facing the backlash. So I think, to me, from an optics perspective, to answer your question, we've done the right things, optics of being there, and the optics of who we brought to the team, and the optics of the combination of the composition of the team, not just from a racial, but also in terms of a transactional heavy team, if you will.
I think that is the US is negotiating on a bit of a back foot here, especially if you look at how they've had to walk back a lot of the decisions they'd made on the tariff front without actually China coming to the table to negotiate. The other thing, though, is I think South Africa, by being there, sends a message that will appease Trump's personal character, given that, he wants the countries to come into Washington to negotiate deals for themselves. Sadly, though, this is a breakdown and a continuing breakdown of multilateralism, which is something that South Africa and the whole world, I think, prefers in dealing with these issues. However, I guess, us being there is a chance for us to negotiate strongly. And I think the president's response to a similar difficult questions at the recent CEO summit held in Abidjan is a flavor of how he sees things. And I think he'll definitely be in his A game to deal with some of those awkward questions when the cameras are there, which is also, part of the whole fanfare and the negotiating process.
Yeah.
And we should. And
Sure, go ahead.
I was going to say as well, we shouldn't worry about him being there for a couple of other reasons. There are much stronger economies than us. The UK has been there. Italy has been there. So we shouldn't, because I've been listening to a lot of analysts saying, oh, we should be going there. We're showing weakness. There's been bigger economies who are much better cards than we have, who have gone to the US, understanding very well, as Sia has said, in one way you have to play onto the strength of the person, and knowing the charm of our president. And if you look at what Starmer did from the UK, what did he do better than anybody else? He went there and charmed and played to his ego. I wouldn't be surprised if Trump says to him, and he probably should say, he should be saying to him, I'd like to invite you as my guest to come and see South Africa for yourself. I think if he can live with that kind of an assurance, that long before the G20s, before we arrive to the G20 discussion, if he can find a way to invite Trump, if not him, certainly a delegation that Trump authorizes to come and see South Africa, I think that'll be actually one of the big wins or takeaway from this trip. Because what Americans believe in seeing things and hearing things. So right now they're hearing things, but they have not seen things on the ground. They're just hearing from 49 people or 59 people who've gone there with false or misinformation about the country, and some other people tweeting about the country. I think if we can bring a couple of them here, and I've seen this work very well. I mean, in my work in Ethiopia and many other countries around the continent, I've seen how this has worked when we've brought in delegations from different countries, from those countries like the US and all those, to come and see for themselves on the ground what actually happens. And that enables people to have a bit of an informed view, particularly if the people who are coming have got the president's ear.
Sia, you've got the agricultural minister and as part of this trip, and I want to focus on his role in all of this. Incredibly important, obviously the sector, central really to the trade discussion between the two countries, but also leader of the Democratic Alliance that in March had concluded their working visit to the United States. What is expected from him, particularly in the message that he shares to the Trump administration, if you were in John Steenhuisen's shoes?
Joe, I think they're expecting me, obviously, to speak to the importance of his portfolio, the agricultural exports. I think it's going to be a critical part of the conversation. The other part, I think, is also kind of the constituency represented by that portfolio, being white Afrikaners who are in the majority, the main people involved in, productive mass scale farming in South Africa. So I think that also then plays to the optics, and also given him being the leader of the opposition, speaks to the general politics. So I think this was really a master stroke by the president by including him in that delegation, because he serves all of those optics. I do think, though, that South Africa's interests are much broader than just agriculture, manufacturing being part of those critical exports that we export, but also in the current realm of the global transition away from carbon and the importance of certain critical minerals, which South Africa also does supply. The importance of our mining sector is actually quite critical. So I do think that that's the reason why we've got the trade and industry minister there as well. And I think lastly, Steenhuisen serves, clarifying also and demystifying a lot of the issues that South Africa and South Africa's approach to dealing with the land reform issues, which again, is a critical part of some of the optics in the misinformation that's been put out there. And I think it'll be important for him to also touch on those issues as well.
Yeah. So let's
And I think
deal with
another
that.
point,
Sure, go ahead.
just a quick
Yeah.
another point on Steenhuisen. I think a fifth point, just to add to see, a fifth point on the importance of having Steenhuisen there is you already had a delegation from the DA much earlier in the year going there. We don't know what was discussed behind closed doors, but because they come from the DA and Steenhuisen is the leader of the DA, in a way it will help to counter whatever or you'll have to counter whatever was said, assuming that it wasn't said in the interest of South Africa, because it will be very. I find it impossible to think that he will go there with a different message from the one that was said by his own party, because otherwise he would not have agreed to go. So, but things as they are, we know that parties are contentious and they would be going there to try and put on their own forward message. So I think it's also on the fifth point. It's very good to have
for having me. Sorry that I was struggling with the hotel's Wi-Fi. I'm in Cape Town at my home. But
Not a problem.
thank you for having me. I think, look, it may have been said, I may have missed it, but it's a very important meeting. It probably couldn't have happened earlier. I think it was important for some time to lapse. And for the country, it's very important. And obviously, all of us hope that it will have a good outcome. I don't think that the Americans. Let me speak about the American administration and separate them from Mr. Trump himself. Mr. Trump may believe things that he's been told by we don't know who, not by any Afrikaners or organization in this country. The Afrikaner Leadership Network, when we met with the ANC, said that we had never said there's white genocide and we had never said there's large-scale expropriation of white or Afrikaner farms. So he got it somewhere. But I do think one must, this thing of misinformation is bandied about. Now, if I were in the American administration and I had to advise the president, I would ask the embassy in South Africa and probably the CIA, who can read everything that's being said on South African media and South African social media. And so I don't think we must overemphasize this thing of misinformation. There's no way that the Americans depend on X or Y or Z to tell them what's happening. They know what's happening. So it's a question of emphasis. So I think that's, for me, the nuance that we have here. I hope that, and I've heard, I think it's also important, I agree that it's important for the Minister of Agriculture, being a DA leader, or DA leader, to be there, and also Mr. Patel. The problem, I think, is that America has had these trade restrictions on many countries, and they've resolved some of them in one meeting because it was only the trade issues. Our situation is slightly more complex because it involves internal politics, call it the old Afrikaner issue, but more than that, and it also involves the ANC government's long-standing relationship with Hamas, Iran, and others, and obviously the court case of Israel. So I don't think that we should we should hope or think, we should hope, but think that this can be resolved in one meeting. My hope is that a process could be started of engagement over the next number of weeks at various levels to try to resolve some of these issues to the acceptance and agreement of both sides.
Yeah, there's a lot more.
But let's be honest here. Everyone's wondering the same thing. Is Ramaphosa walking into a warm welcome, or a diplomatic roasting? Because we haven't forgotten what happened to poor Zelensky. Remember that. Ukraine's president showed up all hopeful, and left looking like he'd just been asked to clean Trump's golf shoes. It was less of a meeting and more like an episode of The Apprentice, International Edition. So naturally, South Africans are watching this trip with raised eyebrows and crossed fingers. Some are hopeful, others, not so much. They're asking tough questions. What kind of reception will Ramaphosa and his team really get? Will Trump even pronounce Ramaphosa correctly? Or are we about to witness another round of political theater starring Donald the Unpredictable? But Ramaphosa isn't just here for a good time. He's got an agenda, and it's packed. From trade talks and economic investment to energy deals and security cooperation, he's aiming to reframe South Africa as a strategic partner worth investing in, not just another country with headlines. And let's be honest, this isn't just about America's view of South Africa. It's also about Africa's view of America. Now we all know Trump's style: loud, brash, and unpredictable. One minute he's talking business, the next he's tweeting insults or bragging about crowd sizes. That's why Ramaphosa's team has reportedly been preparing for everything. We're talking briefing notes, backup plans, and maybe even a diplomatic poker face competition. But give Cyril some credit. He's no stranger to high-stakes negotiations. This is a man who's wrangled ANC factions, dealt with national energy meltdowns, and still manages to deliver speeches like he's reading bedtime stories. Calm, collected, and always calculated. If anyone can keep it cool under the Trump spotlight, it's him. And let's not ignore the elephant in the room: image. This visit is as much about optics as it is about policy. If the photos show smiles, handshakes, and positive body language, the world reads strong relations. But if the mood turns frosty, or Trump goes off script, South Africa could walk away with more questions than answers. At the end of the day, this visit is a gamble. But it's also an opportunity. If Ramaphosa can strike the right tone, secure some tangible commitments, and come out of that meeting with South Africa looking stronger on the world stage, it'll be a win. And let's face it, we could use a few of those. So buckle up, because the next 48 hours could be packed with power moves, press conferences, and possibly a few awkward laughs. One thing's for sure: Ramaphosa isn't just visiting America. He's entering the global spotlight, and the whole world's watching.